All right, what's up, guys? We are back again today for another middle of the day stream. Actually, one of the things I wanted to ask you guys is do you think there is a better time to do these than right now? Obviously, I know later in the day, obviously, like in the evening, at night, when everybody's home from work or, kids are home from school, makes a lot of sense. The issue for me is, I got two young kids, so that's kind of the only time me and my wife get to spend together. And then also, every once in a while, one of those guys wakes up earlier than expected. So, but I am interested to see if you guys think there's a better time to be doing these, just because I want to grow the popularity of this and make sure as many people that are interested in it can watch it. But also, like you guys, especially my guys that are in here like every day chatting it up, I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. And we're gonna get into some stuff today. I got another video coming out tonight that we're gonna talk about. Give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek on. Obviously, I'll have some information about some potential guests that will be coming on again, or new ones that are coming on, and then we're gonna look at some spring outlook, guys. We're gonna look at what the college season is gonna look like as far as some teams that are gonna be competitive this year, and we'll be looking at maybe some fall reports and everything like that from D1 baseball, who do a phenomenal job with that, guys. Like, I cannot recommend it enough. If you're a college baseball fan and you want a ton of information about all different teams, like D1 base, there's no one better than D1 baseball. I mean, they are, they got fall reports on as many Division I schools as you can possibly imagine. And it's not like a lineup outlook. I mean, it's in-depth stuff, talking with coaches about certain players. So we're going to look at some of that. I mean, if Canes is in here, we're going to be looking at Miami's. We'll look at Georgia Tech's. We'll look at some others. Then we'll just look at some other stuff that's going to give us an idea of like what teams may be competitive for this upcoming 2025 season. And then talk about, some stuff I see in youth baseball I think needs to change, or in amateur baseball, which now, like you guys have heard me say, is really, that's college baseball now, right? Or college baseball is not amateur baseball anymore for a lot of different reasons, but amateur baseball more so in high school, travel ball, stuff like that I think certainly needs to change. And you guys have heard me talk about it a bunch, but we'll talk about all that. But we're going to talk now about some stuff that's going on. We'll get to the spring outlook later as more people file in. Still waiting to get as many people in here before we start kind of what we're getting into today. Again, any questions you have for me, any points you have, anything you disagree with, don't hesitate to let me know in the chat. Want to make sure you guys know, if you're looking for help in the recruiting process, scan this QR code right here. Scan it, fill out the form. We'll give you a free evaluation. So kind of where you're at in the process, what potential schools could be interested based on your talent level currently, how our process works, how we work with our clients, and how we can help you out and see if it's a fit. So fill out that form if you're interested. Again, totally free. Our goal in that meeting is to make sure get as much information out of it, as much value out of it as possible. So even if you don't decide to start working with us, at least you feel a little bit better about how the process works and everything like that. Canes, welcome to the chat, of course. The first chatter always. Fire and explosive emojis. That's right. We're going to be looking at the Miami Hurricanes fall report. Canes. We'll look at Georgia Tech's. We'll look at a few others in the SEC and just look at a few other things that are, kind of give us a little bit of an outlook of what the spring may look like. As I always say, guys, typically that preseason top 25, D1 baseball and all these other publications are usually pretty accurate with like the top 5, right? But anything outside of that top 5, most of the time, by the time we're halfway through the season, it's going to look totally different. And that is also true with all the conference, preseason conference outlooks. Usually there's 1 or 2 teams that are near the top that are going to be really good. And then from then on, it's, it could be anything. I mean, look at last year with LSU and Florida. The SEC, and like you guys have heard me say, the ACC are so competitive now. It's anybody's game. It's anybody's conference any year. And so you can't just look at the talent they have on the field, because guys are going to come out of nowhere with big years. Guys that are projected to be really good are going to get injured, or they're going to have a down year. And so usually they're accurate with a couple guys, but there's just no way they can. Baseball is the hardest sport to predict as far as who's going to be good and who isn't, because like I said, you could see a team with a bunch of young guys that come out of nowhere and just surprise people. But first off, guys, let me get to the first thing we're going to talk about today, and that is, are you getting better or worse? So I think it's really important for players to understand that your development in baseball is a lot like investing in the stock market, right? You put money in, and the best saying about the stock market is time in the market always beats timing the market. Meaning, if you put money in Tesla a month and a half ago, you doubled your money. But if you put money in when you're 18 years old and you keep that money in and you keep investing over 50 years, that money is going to eventually just be so large that there's no way you could have timed the market perfect enough to make that amount of money. The same is true with your development in anything, in sports, in life. You put the work in daily. And a lot of times in baseball, especially for pitchers, they put a lot of work in as far as, velocity training, getting stronger in the weight room, and they don't see that velocity tick up for a while. And all of a sudden, after about 6 months, they're throwing a bullpen, or they're in their first game of the spring or first game of the summer, and they go from consistently throwing in the low 80s to, man, I was sitting 86, 89 in that start. And the problem is, a lot of kids, they start that development and they stop right before they hit that compounding effect, where the amount of days they've stacked on top of each other finally shows up. And the other issue is, there's no such thing as stagnation in baseball. You're either getting better or you're getting worse, right? It would be exactly like taking the money out of the stock market and just putting in a bank savings account. Well, the problem with that, as a lot of us know with inflation, you're getting a very small return rate in that savings account, and inflation's going to outpace it. And so that money is going to be worth less in a couple years than it was worth when you put it in the bank to save it. And the same is true in development. If you're all of a sudden you're thinking, well, I'm not really seeing a lot of gains from this, and I don't think it's worth doing this, and you stop and you're not doing anything any longer, or you're doing stuff every once in a while, you're getting worse. You're not getting better. And you guys have heard me talk about in BP, a lot of times in some of this stuff, guys, it's not just about, I went to the cage and hit for an hour. A lot of guys every hitter in the history of the game could get better in 30 minutes if they're actually focused on what they're trying to do in the cage and they're challenging themselves. And then a guy who just goes in the cage and hits for an hour and gets nothing but, BP fastballs right down the middle. It's like, I tell this with all of my clients that are hitters. Anybody in high school who's a high school player who's starting on their high school team, for the most part, can hit a BP fastball right down the middle and look good. That's not getting you better. Have the guy throwing you BP mix up pitches. Have him throw, mix in some sliders, mix in some changeups. Start in an 0-2 count. See if you can fight. See if you can fight off close pitches. Act like you're in a game in BP. Get on the velo machine. Get on the breaking ball machine. Don't just hit BP fastballs the entire time. Take a round or two to get loose, sure. But once you're loose, challenge yourself. And a big thing not to do is underhand toss. I am a complete hater when it comes to underhand toss in hitting development, because one, you're never facing a guy throwing it from under here, unless it's a submarine guy. And let's just be honest, that's less than that's like a marginal fraction of a percentage of the time. So what you're doing is you're training your swing to match a plane of a pitch that you never face in a game. And so if you do a lot of underhand toss, you're going to see a lot of swing and miss in the game. You're going to be missing underneath a lot, because you're creating a swing and you're creating muscle memory of a swing path that's not efficient against an overhand, slightly downhill plane, right? So I'm a big believer, if you want to do something like underhand toss, just have the guy sit on a bucket and throw you darts, is what we would call it. Throw darts from an overhand position, because then you're at least facing an arm, a ball path and an arm slot that you're going to be facing in the game. And again, if your BP is not firm that you're facing, you could be creating issues. Like if it has any kind of an arc, right? You're not training to hit a fastball. You're training to hit a breaking ball. So again, you have to be really conscious of the way you're training, especially in hitting, because the way you're doing BP and the way you're training and hitting needs to be as game-like as possible, right? There's a big reason why guys make swing changes and make mechanical changes, and then they get in a game and nothing shows up. It's because they're not training in game-like environments. And so your BP and your training and hitting need to be as game-like as possible when it comes to improving yourself as a hitter. And you guys have heard me say that a bunch. And again, same is true with pitching. Throw live BP sessions, right? Have a guy stand in there in a cage. It's one thing to throw a bullpen with no hitter and everything like that. It's funny how a lot of guys are really good bullpen pitchers, but they get out in the game with a hitter in the box and they're like, man, I just don't feel as comfortable. My stuff, I don't feel as comfortable throwing my stuff, and my command is different. And it's like, yeah, there's another variable introduced to you in the game that you're not training. Like, one of the things I love watching is guys in the off season who are, they get loose, and they instead of just throwing a typical bullpen, they have hitters stand in. And so they're throwing their bullpen, they're working on their pitches, but they're actually seeing how hitters react to their pitches. And a hitter is going to tell you if the pitch is good or not, right? That's immediate feedback. If every single hitter is barreling up your stuff, they're seeing it well. It's not moving the way you think it is. And bullpens can be deceiving. And man, that was a perfect pitch. Or man, this pitch looked like it moved really well. Well, again, I've faced guys who had really good spin rate on breaking balls and it didn't look like it. I've faced guys that had not great spin rate on breaking balls and it did look like they had good spin. I faced guys this is the thing that most analytics guys don't understand that are involved in professional baseball and college baseball is I faced guys that threw 100 and it looked like 92 at the plate. And I've faced guys that threw 92 and it looked like dang near 100. Right? So velocity is one metric, but if the hitters if the hitters are reacting to it like it's not 100, then something's going on there. Do you believe in pitchers throwing all year round or taking some time off in the off season? I'm not. Again, AP, thanks for the question and thanks. Welcome to the chat. Obviously my expertise is in hitting, right? I had multiple job offers to be a minor league hitting coach after my career was over in professional baseball. I worked with some of the best hitting coaches in the game. especially from the swing mechanic side, the swing side. I think we have to differentiate between hitting coaches who are really good about making your swing more efficient and hitting coaches that are really good about teaching you how to be a hitter, right? And there's the elite guys are good at both, but there's most guys are either really good at training your swing and making you have as an efficient a path as possible and an adjustable path as possible. And then there's some hitting coaches like, Sandy Guerrero I had in the minor leagues from the Dominican, who, he may not have known the rotation acceleration metric or, your approach, your attack angle or anything like that. But man, he could teach you how to be a hitter. He could teach you what you need to be thinking at the plate. He could teach you what your approach need to be. And so we need to differentiate between that. But with pitchers, again, I'm not an expert on pitching, but I will say this. I think throwing year-round is totally fine as long as you're managing your load, right? I don't think you need to be throwing intense bullpens 3 times a week year-round. A lot of big league pitchers that throw year-round, what they do is they'll throw 2 times a week. And a lot of times it's not even if they're not necessarily throwing bullpens, they're just playing catch. And the reason for that is they're trying to keep the feel of their pitches that they had in the previous season. Because we all know, as any of us that have played, and the same is true for hitters, you take a month or 2 off and your swing feels totally different when you get back in the cage, or your arm path feels different as a pitcher. Your feel for the pitches is totally different and totally off because you haven't picked up a baseball. And like Max Scherzer is a guy who throws year round. I think Verlander is a guy that throws year round. And one of the things Scherzer said was, he'll play catch 2 or 3 times a week for a few months when the season's over, but he's not really like locking in on the mound and bullpen wise. And then as he gets closer to the season, he starts that process. But his main focus was, and the main thing he said was, I throw year round so I don't lose the feel for my arm path, for my grips, because I face guys like this all the time where you'd face a guy one year, and especially when I was AAA for 5 years in the Pacific Coast League, which is, it's not even called that anymore, but you'd face an arm who was just disgusting, nasty. And then you face him the next year and his pitches aren't as sharp and command wasn't as sharp. And you got the sense that, he kind of had taken a break from throwing and then could never kind of regain that feel for the pitch that he had in the previous year. And again, the same is true for hitters. And every year you're going to feel different about your swing. I mean, every year, in 2016, I hit 340 in AAA and 350 plate appearances. And that next year, you're trying to, man, I need to get that swing feel back from the previous year, but you're never really going to get that back. So there's always going to be a little bit difference, but I'm not against throwing year round. And to me, AP, especially once a kid is, 18 years old and he's kind of fully developed, I don't see the issue. Obviously, for a young kid, I wouldn't suggest it. I think you should monitor how many pitches a 14-year-old's throwing or a 15-year-old's throwing or a 16-year-old's throwing. I mean, your body's still growing at the same time where you're putting a lot of force and exertion on the elbow and the shoulder. But, all the data we have from the big leagues is that arm injuries are every year record highs. So this idea, especially with adults that are involved in baseball, in college and professional baseball, that protecting the arm and limiting pitches, it doesn't seem to be having the effect that everyone thought it was going to, right? The idea was, well, you protect a 21-year-old's arm when he comes out of college, and so when he gets to the big leagues, we can build him up. Well, those guys are still blowing out at a record pace now than 30 years ago, right? There was no arm program 30 years ago. I mean, you kind of just did what you did. There was no protocol in place, and every protocol they've put in place in professional baseball, if anything, correlation doesn't equal causation, but the correlation is the more you protect these guys' arms, the more hurt they get, the more likely they are to get injured. So I think you got to differentiate between a young kid who's 14 or 15 Can you throw year round? Sure, but you need to have a deloaded phase where you're just playing catch and you're keeping your arm in shape, but you're not putting a lot of force into it. But that is kind of the enigma in baseball as far as health wise. How do you protect pitchers' arms and how do you protect them from blowing out? Certainly, I think you're seeing it more now in the big leagues because you're seeing starters go less and less innings. So your arms that are built up and that should be conditioned to go longer innings aren't throwing as many innings. And then your bullpen guys who are typically 1 to 2 inning guys are throwing more innings than ever before. Your bullpens are picking up way more innings than ever before, and you're seeing more arm injuries than ever before. So it's more like if you're conditioned to throw a lot of innings, you should be safer in a sense of having an arm injury. Whereas the bullpen guys who are not built up to throw the amount of innings that they're throwing, it seems like those guys are just blowing out left and right. And so it's like in baseball, and there's no correlation to mechanics. I mean, there's guys with the cleanest mechanics in the world and have had their arm protected and the amount of pitches they're throwing protected, they're blowing out. There are guys who are extreme outliers in mechanics that look like, man, this guy's going to blow out on any pitch, and they never have an arm injury. So, because, and again, this added velocity is also a big effect, right? But the thing is this, I mean, you may have more guys throwing harder than ever before, but it's not that Bob Gibson didn't throw really hard or Nolan Ryan didn't throw really hard, and you didn't see the arm injuries like you do now. And there's also the amount of arm injuries to Dominican and the Latin American born players in the big leagues and in professional baseball are way less. And so there's something there that needs to be kind of figured out, that the American-born players seem to suffer the arm injuries way more. And again, it's also this idea, the old school approach to pitching was, starting pitcher, you start like Justin Verlander, his typical start would be, in the first inning, he's not throwing as hard as he can. He's trying to kind of save himself for the latter part of the game. And then by the 8th inning, he's throwing 98. And so that was kind of the old school view of pitching where, you don't show a guy all your pitches in the first time through the order. And now you're just pitching to a percentage chart. Like, this guy struggles with sliders, we're going to throw him sliders. And so you have starting pitchers that are throwing all of their pitches to the leadoff hitter of the game. And because you're doing that, again, the idea 10 years ago, 15 years ago was that you try to get through that first 9 guys without throwing all your pitches. So when you get to the second part of the order, they haven't seen that changeup yet, or that curveball yet, or that slider yet. Guys threw more pitches back then. Now guys are specializing in 2 or 3 pitches. So there's a lot of stuff going on that are just totally different in today's game. But I'm not against throwing year round as long as you're smart about it. So I hope that answers that question. And thanks for the question, AP. So now we're going to get to some of the spring outlook, guys, and what we could be in for college baseball this year. Again, we're going to be going to D1 baseball. Highly recommend. Or AP, another question. Let's see what you got here. I think it's a shame that some kids who can hit and have high on-base percentage may be overlooked by colleges because they don't have 90-plus exit velo. Getting on base is a skill, no matter the power, in my opinion. Yeah, and this is the thing, AP, is, that was me, right? That was me. High bat-to-ball tool, high average hitter, high on-base percentage, didn't strike out a lot, but I was certainly going to be in the lower, probably one of the lower home run totals on the team. Now, fortunately for me, the era I played in was kind of the dead ball era of college baseball from 2011 to 2015, where you were still using the old balls with that were used with the BESR bats, and that was my freshman year. Was the first year they brought in the BBCOR bats, and so you were a power hitting stud if you hit 10 plus home runs. I mean, you had big league power if you hit 10 plus home runs. And now, with how much the bat technology has increased, and these new balls that they're using in college baseball, which seem to just get more juiced every year. And again, I have people on social media tell me, well, guys are just stronger now, or they have better swings now. And I'm like, power is power. And the weight room existed when I was playing in 2011. It was not because guys are stronger now. And power is just way more sought after in college now because it's easier to hit home runs now than it really has ever been. I mean, we're seeing home run records that are being broken from the BESR era. And so, the ball's flying more than it almost ever, except for maybe the drop 5 era in college baseball. So, power, the problem is you still need guys, AP, and I agree, at the top of the order or maybe at the bottom of the order that can hit for average and have a high on base percentage. I mean, you need guys that put up team at bats, but it just seems to be it's not as. You're right that if you're a kid that really can hit and has high on base percentage, but you don't seem physical enough, and maybe you're undersized and you don't have the power currently, coaches are going to see if they can find a guy that has maybe a little bit more. And they're going to miss out on guys that end up being really good players. I say it all the time, AP. Like the likelihood that I would have been at Georgia Tech in this era of recruiting is virtually zero. I mean, I was one of the lowest ranked recruits in my recruiting class, and I probably would have had to go to a mid-major or a lower level D1 to put up numbers. And that's what you're going to see, right? That's what you're going to see now moving forward. But it is brutal that, there's a lot of guys that are getting overlooked. And I brought up a story about this just like a month ago about a kid who balled out in the fall, didn't hit for a lot of power, but third highest average on the team, high on over 500 on base percentage, made one error all fall, played really good defense, stole 11 or 12 bases, and he got cut. And people think I made that story up. It's legit. So I know the family personally. So that I didn't make that up. And so that's the reality, is that he was looked at as a coaching staff as just, man, he's, and again, I disagree entirely, because I feel like, well, you kind of want that guy as like maybe a first guy off the bench at worst, right? You want that guy on your bench some guy goes down. I mean, that's the next guy to fill in. But I guess that wasn't what their evaluation was. So, but thanks for the chat there. So we're going to look at this now, guys. This is the top 150 college prospects, according to D1 Baseball, right? So there's going to be guys that are ranked higher on Baseball America or Perfect Game or whatever. Kane says you would have been this kid in the 26th class. I'm guessing you might have tagged me in something, Canes. I don't know. But that would have probably been my story, right? You get on campus and you have a really good fall, and then maybe they say, and again, not every staff is going to do that type of thing. But so these are the top 10, right? I'm gonna organize this by college, or at least alphabetically, so we can see which schools have the highest ranked guys. So let me zoom in so you guys can see this a little bit better. So Alabama, 3 guys in the top 150. All right. Arizona 2, Arizona State 2, Arkansas 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So Arkansas, a lot of pro prospects. And remember, this is 50 in college. So what that means is doesn't mean they're going to get in the 4 rounds or 5 rounds if they're in this. It just means college players, these are the best 150, at least in regards to, pro potential. And certainly, you got to mix high schoolers in the draft. So a lot of these guys will maybe, they'll maybe all be drafted in the top 300, but they're not going to all get drafted in the top 150. So Arkansas's got 7, right? Auburn 2, Clemson with 1. This is really surprising. Obviously, Cam Canarella, just a really good center fielder for Clemson, but surprising that Clemson only has 1. Again, could mean that they have a really good youth core. There's a bunch of sophomores that aren't draft eligible. Coastal Carolina 2, Dallas Baptist 3. Again, one of the best mid-majors in the country in Texas. Not only do they do a great job of developing, but they're always, making it in the super regionals, and one of the best coaching staffs in the country, in my opinion. Duke 1, another surprise. East Carolina 1. And it'll be funny to see the correlation once we get into the spring and the season's happen. How many of these schools that have all these pro prospects, what kind of success are they having? Florida, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Florida State, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Georgia, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 for Georgia. So you're seeing a little bit of a correlation here. SEC, ACC schools having a lot of pro prospects. Georgia Tech with 1. I don't necessarily agree with only them having 1 from the guys I know on that team. And again, a lot of these guys, some of these guys will have really good years and their stock will go up. Some of these guys will have bad years, stock will go way down. But Georgia Tech having 1, a little surprising. Kennesaw State with 2, mid-major in Kennesaw, Georgia with 2. Louisville, 1, 2, 3. LSU, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. LSU with 9. No surprise there, right, Canes? No surprise with 9 with LSU. Again, I mean, they're always going to have just an extremely talented team. The question is, what's their overall record going to be at the end of the year? I mean, you saw last year. I mean, they were one of the teams that people thought were going to be left out of the tournament. They ended up getting in. It was kind of controversial, but they should be. I mean, they should be top 5 team in the country with this amount of guys projected to go, or top 150 draft prospects in college. Michigan 1, Michigan State 1, Mississippi State 2. Again, pretty surprising for a Mississippi State. NC State 3, North Carolina 3, Oklahoma 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, a lot of these SEC schools, a lot of these guys are, they have a lot of guys that are transferring in that would have been really, really high prospects no matter where they're at. But Oklahoma, again, SEC is looking like they're, going to be stacked as usual. Oklahoma State, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, or sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4. Ole Miss 1. Again, really surprising. Ole Miss 1. Oregon State, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And obviously they're independent this year. They're not going to be in a conference with all the drama that's gone on with the Pac-12 and teams leaving. And it's going to be interesting to see kind of what becomes of a lot of these top-tier West Coast schools because of all of these, Cal left. Yeah, Miami was 0, Canes, right? And it'll be interesting to see. They may have 0 on this list, and all of a sudden they may be top of the ACC, depending on how they perform. But that is really surprising for Miami, right? Really surprising. Penn State 1, South Carolina 3, Stanford 1, TCU 3, Tennessee 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No surprise there. LSU and Tennessee, they're going to be an LSU, Tennessee, and Arkansas right now, each with 7+. I think Florida had 7. Texas 1, 2, 3, 4. A&M 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A&M has the number 1 projected college player in the country, Jace Lavalette. Vanderbilt 1, 2, 3, 4. Virginia 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wake Forest 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I think Wake Forest with the most in the ACC as far as players ranked in the top 150 college players. Yeah, and again, Canes, Max Galvin will go in the top 3 rounds. Yeah, I mean, again, this list, again, these aren't professional scouts making this list. So again, I mean, it's going to be, it's not going to be 100% accurate. None of these lists ever are, because guys are going to get hurt. Guys are going to have down years. Pitchers' velocity all of a sudden will be down. I remember Kumar Rocker when we were in the Vandy Regional and I was coaching, and we didn't face him. We've actually faced Leiter, and he was just, out of this world how overpowering he was at the college level. And we were doing a lot of scouting on Kumar Rocker, and we were like, he's throwing like 89, 90 mile an hour fastballs, and then all the stuff came out about his arm, and ended up not signing, and kind of basically training for a year, and then ended up re-signing for a big deal with the Rangers. But, we're watching the video on him and we're thinking, like, something's wrong with his arm, because this is a guy that sits mid-90s and can touch the upper 90s. And he was reaching back and throwing 92. So the common denominator here, guys, is obviously SEC and ACC are, again, the premier conferences in college baseball. The Big 12 is kind of right behind them. But, the SEC, ACC are going to have the deepest conferences. They're going to have the deepest amount of teams that are competitive. It's going to be a bloodbath in both of those conferences. The idea that, and this is why you saw a school like LSU or Florida get into the NCAA tournament last year, is that the committee basically made the decision that these conferences are now so difficult that a 13 and 17 Florida team, I think LSU was 14 and 16, I could be wrong, they might have been 13 and 17 as well, deserved getting in over a mid-major school that had a really good record. But the SEC was such a difficult schedule that those teams deserved it. Now, that was really controversial. A lot of the mid-major coaches were really upset by that. Obviously, the ones that missed the tournament because of it felt like, listen, just because you play in a hard conference doesn't mean you can not do well in conference, and because it's so difficult, you get in. And that's going to be something we see every year now, because, again, the conferences are so difficult now. The ACC and the SEC, it's so hard to just go 500 in conference play that's going to be the debate of the future. Is it as a 13 and 17 team in the ACC or SEC worthy of making the tournament over a mid-major who's a bubble team, an at-large bid mid-major who's done really well? The ACC, maybe there's not as much leniency. You go to a maybe 14 and 16 in the ACC kind of gets you there, as long as you do well in the tournament. That was one thing LSU, what saved LSU was their performance in the tournament. I think the biggest controversy was Florida getting in, one, because their AD was on the committee and they didn't do as well as LSU in the tournament. And you felt like, all right, maybe one of those schools gets in, but not both. And so the biggest controversy was the fact that Florida's AD was on the committee. And then ultimately, even though they went 13 and 17 in conference play, they still got in. And so now we're going to get into some of these fall reports. And the first one I want to look at, let me see if I can find it. First one I want to look at is Vandy, because one of the kids I worked with is a freshman at Vanderbilt this year. And he's actually listed in this fall report. So the narrative around Vandy boys has been that the offense must improve in order to keep up with the powerhouses, pun intended, at the top of the league. Because Vandy is a powerhouse. I mean, that's, they had a down year last year, but they're one of the best programs in the country. The definition of improved can be debated, but an increased slugging percentage seems to be at the top of the list for most. However, it turns out the additions of assistant coaches Jason King and Ty Blankmeyer feel impactful. Both of these men bring outstanding resumes and pedigree to the program. There is a confidence and edge to both of them. And viewing their interactions in the fall games versus Nevada, it would be very surprising if King and Blankmeyer don't move the needle. These were excellent hires. And again, we won't know, right? We won't know until the season comes and how teams, how the players perform. And again, it's not like coaches can't play the game for players. That's the one thing, my entire career as a player, I never had anxiety at all. I never, of course you had nerves, like you go into a big at bat or before every game with the national anthem, I'd get those butterflies. But when I stepped in that box, I knew what my plan was. I knew I had prepared. I knew what my game plan was. So I didn't have anxiety. When my first game as a coach, I had more anxiety in that one game as I did in my entire playing career. And it's because you've put the work in, you've trained these guys, you've coached them on what to do in what situations. You've worked on them, you've worked with them on their swings, you've worked on the defense stuff. You just hope that they do what you train them to do. And so we won't know about, what Ty Blankmeyer and Jason King, how the hires are going to be until the season comes, right? Like, no one cares how you look in the fall. It's about how you look in the spring. But going back to focus on increased slug, sophomore corner player Braden Holcomb has been the obvious first place to look for answers. He's a mountain of a man, 6'4", 253. Canes, I think you've said something here. The freshman at Vandy that were his final 4 schools. Yes. The freshman at Vandy, his final 3 were Duke, Georgia Tech, and Vandy. And he was like a 4.3 GPA, super high, ACT, SAT scores. And he was legitimate. A kid legitimately could have gotten into the Ivy Leagues. So he really wanted highest academic possible, but highest baseball possible as well. And so that, in the ACC and SEC, that's your, Boston College, Duke, Vandy, Georgia Tech. That's, and there's more in there, but that's, those were his options. Holcomb's skill set is more complete than what would be expected from a person of his stature. He moves well, and the infield actions are at least average. That's not a good sign. Or at least average is kind of like saying, they might be average. He could play either corner infield spot, and the bat to ball skills are above average. The power potential is massive, of course. While this is the one thing that's crazy about Vanderbilt. Them saying they want more slugging. It's really crazy in this era that you're struggling to have hitters hit for power, because the ball is just flying at such an alarming rate. I mean, at Georgia Tech, I would see guys take the worst swings and, get fooled by a pitch, butt out swing, and it would go over the fence. So it's, I think it might have been, swing plane issues, not training the swing plane correctly. Again, we don't know, but it is crazy that was kind of an issue. Vandy looks ready to invest full-time at bats in him, and that seems wise, but I don't think it's the answer to the original concern. That's not really a good overlook there. It's like, I don't know if that's the answer. They're going to give him full at bats. It's like he's a big physical monster, so we hope he hits for home run. He'll hope he hits for powers. And so RJ Austin obviously returning. Again, he's not really a power guy, but he's got some thump in his bat. He's more of a speed guy. The other star is true freshman Brody Johnston, that might feel uncomfortable. There is a precedent for this in the SEC. Ethan Petrie and Dylan Cruz are recent examples of players making an immediate impact in the league. Again, whenever you're hoping that a freshman turns into like a Dylan Cruz or a Drew Burress type guy, that's rare, right? It's more likely that he has a good year, but he's not this superstar. The right-handed hitter from in-state turned heads last summer in the Appalachian League. He competed against college players and stood out. That has continued this fall. He's country strong, shows outstanding feel for the game. He's also athletic enough to be the backup shortstop for Vandy. Corbin led Johnson off in both games against Nevada, and he could be very disruptive to the top of the lineup. So hitting leadoff, I don't expect him to be if you're going to hit leadoff, he's probably not going to be a huge power bat. And they talk about the catcher here. So we're going to get to the pitching here. And Vandy's always developed arms, right? They've always had really good pitchers. I think back to playing against Carson Fulmer and I can't remember his name. Pitcher for the Dodgers, Walker Buehler. And I faced Walker Buehler when he was a freshman. I was a junior in our regional. And you could tell he was going to be a star. I mean, he was 92, 95 as a freshman, tall, lanky, Breaking ball was decent at that time. It wasn't anything crazy. All his off-speed pitches were kind of meh at the time. He could throw them for strikes, but he wasn't a guy you felt like that was overpowering you as a freshman. But you knew like the massive potential was there. And then I faced him maybe 4 years later in AAA, and he was a monster. He was throwing upper 90s. He threw a cutter, hammer breaking ball, wipeout slider, solid changeup. What did they say about Mendez, the Dayton transfer? I know that someone Miami was very interested in. He was freshman All-American. I'll see right here. Let's see Mendez. In the outfield, Austin is obvious leader in center field. Transfer David Mendez is a converted infielder with athleticism and hitterish reputation. Posted big numbers, 342, 442, 505, for the Flyers in his true freshman season. Mendez can play all three outfield spots, so not much about how he performed in the fall, and so they'll just have to see. Doesn't sound like, usually they'll say, like, this guy really impressed in the fall. So, who knows? But Vandy's going to have good arms. They always do. Sophomore Miller Green, who had a great year last year. Wonderful kind of problem for Corbin. Is he a rotation arm or a lockdown reliever? Miller Green was actually committed to Georgia Tech, and then like a month before getting on campus, he got out of his commitment and national letter and committed to Vanderbilt after the pitching coach change. And I know Georgia Tech was really upset about that, but he's going to be a big time arm. And this is my guy right here. So freshman left-hander Matthew Shorey started game 2 versus Nevada, and he is an interesting addition to the staff. He surrendered some hard contact in his one inning of work, but also showed the ability to miss bats with multiple pitches. Reports are that he has been up to 94 and surrendered very few hits this fall. Shorey attacks from a funky lower slot, and he showed a feel for getting his fastball in on right-handed hitters. His quality sweeper offered a second pitch that could open the door to a starting role at some point. So Matthew Shorey throws from this angle as a lefty. He's true low three-quarter slot right here. He's got elite command. I saw him in 3 innings of work in the summer, strike out 9 guys, 0 walks. He was Prep Baseball's National Player of the Week in his senior spring 1 week. He threw 9 1/3 innings, struck out 21 guys, 0 walks. 0 walks. Struck out 21 guys. He's going to be a stud. He's still, I think, a guy that could probably add 15, 20 pounds of muscle. So there's going to be more velocity in the tank. But the one thing he has going for him is he's got that command that you can't teach. And I think he's going to be a weapon for Vandy this year. He's going to get a lot of innings, whether it's in maybe a midweek starter role as a freshman, which they could put him on just to get experience starting, or if they feel like he's kind of a 3-inning guy for them on the weekend, or certainly a left-handed specialist that can get lefties out with his angle. But I'm excited to see him pitch for Vandy. Now we're going to go to Miami Canes. We're going to read over Miami. PVAMU taking the SWAC. All right, Kenneth. All right, hey, put it on Kenneth. He's calling it right now. He's calling it. Thanks. Welcome to the chat, Kenneth. Also, thanks for chatting. Canes, freshman left-handed pitcher. Those are in very, very high demand. They're basically first guys off the board. Yeah, and he was a late bloomer, right? He wasn't one of those guys in the 24 class that signed really early. He committed after his junior summer. And again, he had really good schools involved. Ended up choosing Vandy. He's from Nashville, so that was a large part of it. It's like 20 minutes from where he lives. So all of his friends are going to be able to see him play and stuff. And I won't get into with all of our clients, again, scan the QR code if you're interested in maybe becoming one of our clients. With all of our clients, we have a kind of a decision meeting where we go over all the schools involved. We talk about their roster makeup. For Shorey, for example, it's about, what does the pitching roster look like? How many lefties do they have? what are the coaches saying? Does it feel like the coaches love you? I do. I know for a fact that all three schools really loved him. I won't say which school I thought would be the best spot for him to get a lot of innings as a freshman. And you have to remember, when he made this commitment, he would sit around 86 to 89. So he had made a big jump in velocity, but he wasn't where he is now, touching 94. And so, I mean, he ended up choosing Vandy, and I think he's going to have a bright career there. Some of the velos here are very questionable to me. I went to at least 5 of the scrimmages in the scout day. I never saw Robert touch anywhere near what they're saying. Yeah, that's kind of always the case, Kane. If anything, I thought everyone's velos were down. Yeah, it is funny because you'll see these velos that are kind of talked about, and then you go to a scrimmage or you go to like first couple games of the season, and you're like, everyone's velos are like significantly lower. And that's kind of always been the case. What will happen is, like in a bullpen, a kid will hit that once, like all fall. And when the D1 baseball staff are talking to the coaches, they'll say, yeah, he's been up to this or that. And like, I fully expect Shorey to be sitting probably in the season 88 to 92, and he may pop a 94 every once in a while. But I'm going to expect Shorey to be kind of sitting in the high 80s, like around 88, 89, and 88 to 90. And then he'll top out at 91, 92. And every once in a while, he may pop something higher. But that's kind of how all these are. JD Arteaga, who's set to start his second season as head coach of the Hurricanes, has brought in 15 transfers, and many of them were from situations described above. From smaller college towns to the Magic City. Most of our transfers this year are not from big programs. They are mostly from mid-majors, and they are guys who want to prove themselves against better competition. We looked a lot at character and guys who will fit the culture we're trying to build. So, our JD Arteaga, I think there's everybody in coaching, in baseball, college baseball, in the coaching world, loved that he finally got the head coaching job, because he's been there forever. He's a Miami legend, and you feel like at Miami, and Canes, you and I have talked about this, they have a lot of Latin players, right? A lot of Spanish-speaking players who are from maybe Cuban immigrants or Dominican or Venezuelan or whatever, Puerto Rican. And you kind of want someone on your staff who kind of fits that culture. And JD obviously fits it to a T. And so I feel like they're going to be, again, who knows what happens this year, but I think Miami's back on the right track to kind of get back to upper echelons of college baseball. They've had flashes of it in recent years, but they certainly aren't, like the early 2000s when they were the best team in the country every year. Kane says, I truly agree with him. I'm riding with this plan. I'm hoping it works. Yeah, and that's all you can do. You can just hope it works. Miami has won 4 national titles. Our Hurricanes brought in 13 freshmen and returned 8 veterans. They went 27-30 last season. Quite a disappointment for one of the greatest programs in college baseball history. They've won 4 national titles, 2 under Ron Frazier, 2 with Jim Morris as coach, 1999-2001. Beyond that, Miami has advanced to the College World Series 25 times, and in 2016, the Hurricanes set a record by advancing to a regional 44 consecutive years. So obviously Arteaga, former Hurricanes pitcher, his number was retired. He was inducted in Miami's Hall of Fame. He was promoted to head coach last season after 21 years in charge of the pitching staff. So he's been there forever. And they've always had stud pitchers. Only have 6 returning players, not 8, Kane says. Thanks for the update, Canes. Under Arteaga in the 24 AC Championship, 11 seed Miami made a surprising run, beating Louisville 8-5 and Clemson 8-7. They ended up losing to Duke in the semifinals. So we'll look at this. Tanner Smith, who made 32 starts last year for a 45-16 Oregon State team, as a defense-first backstop. So this is a kid who, he was probably the number 2 catcher. He made 32 starts. So you probably had another catcher who wasn't as good defensively. You could DH him some games and get Tanner Smith in there behind the plate, who was a better defender. He gives us leadership we were somewhat lacking last year. Smith hit .221 last season with 4 doubles, 5 homers, and a .782 OPS. So you're gonna want to see that higher, right? And again, it's not unheard of for guys to make jumps and have a way better year the next year, but that would be concerning for what he's going to be able to do this year. Challenging Smith will be 3 freshmen. Again, it may be another situation where Smith is kind of the defensive catcher, and then you have another guy who can catch some and who's got a better bat. There are 2 locks here. Third baseman Daniel Cuvée. No, everyone knows that. He was Miami's best overall player. I mean, he was one of the best players in the country as a freshman last year. And second baseman Dorian Gonzalez. Cuvée led Miami in batting average, homers, runs, RBIs, slugging percentage, and on-base percentage. Okay. And then he hit 330 in the Cape, Arteaga says. He tied for the team lead with 12 errors last season, but Arteaga said the tools for improvement are there. It's all about focus, and Cuvée reportedly made huge strides as a leader. Gonzalez hit 303 last season with 8 homers. Again, in today's era, guys, I want to make this pretty clear. All our freshman catchers look horrible. Ethan Puig, who has never played catcher, I think will eventually start. He's a dirtbag, hard-nosed guy. Tavares has the yips throwing to second and first. Yeah, you're never going to play if that's the case. But hitting, so what I want to make clear to you guys is hitting 350 in college baseball now is not what it was in 2011 to 2015, right? Because the ball didn't jump as much, so balls that you hit in the gap now that end up being just out of reach of an outfielder, those were caught. Balls didn't jump off the bat as much, so a hard ground ball in the 6 hole, it ended up getting caught and guy would throw you out. So it's a lot easier to hit over 300 now just with the way the ball's traveling. So 303 is kind of that's okay. But again, you're going to look for this to improve if you're Miami. Liberty transfer is a good shot winning the job at first base. 6'6" lefty, blasted 11 homers at Liberty last season, posted 981 OPS. Boom. So you like that. Guys hitting power, 981 OPS. He's going to be a hitter only at Miami. People give Dorian a lot of crap, but he went from 198 to 303 and is a very reliable player. Yeah, so I mean, he made that big of a jump, then he's probably going to make another jump. Because hitting's all about confidence, and the more experience you have in the box, and the more you feel again, what gets a lot of guys when they first start playing is they're just pressing to prove themselves and solidify themselves in the lineup. So they end up failing a lot more because they're pressing so much. And so, again, it's you see guys like that happen. All of a sudden, when they feel like they've locked up the job, they have a lot more success. The biggest battle has been at shortstop between freshman Adrian Arriazaga and Brandon DeGotti and UNC Greensboro transfer Jake Ogden. Ogden is considered the favorite. His natural position is third base, but he made every routine play at shortstop this fall. That's another kind of one of those things where he made every routine play at shortstop this fall. That's kind of what the given is if you're going to play shortstop, right? He made every routine play. Ogden started all 54 games at UNC Greensboro, hit 313, stole some bases, couple doubles, some home runs. Arriazaga, a native of Puerto Rico, was the Reds' 14th round pick this year. He has the highest ceiling of Miami shortstops. DeGotti is the kid I told you about. That was our last signing, kind of like you. Okay. DeGotti has the ability to steal hits. His brother Alex, 29, is a pro shortstop who played 2 games in the majors in 2021. I thought Brandon would be overmatched at the plate this fall, but he wasn't. He hit 286. He has great baseball instincts. In the outfield, loaded with lefty hitters Max Galvin, Michael Torres, Fabio Peralta, and Jake Kulikowski. Junior college sophomore in 23, Galvin hit 451 games with 58 runs, 17 doubles, 3 triples, 6 home runs. Galvin was hurt last year at Oklahoma State and did not play, but had a great summer as the MVP of the Northwoods League All-Star Game. For the season, he had 344, 20 doubles, 13 home runs. Yeah, I mean, that's really good in the Northwoods League. So, I mean, I agree with you, Canes. I mean, he puts up a performance like that, he's going to be fine in the draft. The best defensive center fielder the Hurricanes have had in 20 years since Danny Figueroa left for the pros in 2005 is freshman Torres. I'm not sure how much he will hit, but he will save runs, and he has a strong arm. Again, it's crazy because, It shouldn't be. Again, I mean, hitting numbers are up all around every year, so it's just hard to, if you bring in a guy, number one, you should hope that he's going to hit. So who knows? I mean, great. It's like you play great defense in center field. That's great, but in college baseball, you got to hit. You got to hit some. Miami's second best defensive outfielder. Late in games, look for Torres in center and Peralta in right. Gabby Gutierrez could get duty as a defensive replacement in left. Bobby Marsh going to be maybe the DH. Rotation. Fastball to 95, 96s fall with good sink. Griffin Hugas. One of the arguments in our message boards is if you are saving a run, you can always earn a run. Yeah, I mean, no, defense is way more important than I think a lot of modern baseball people think. Right? It's way overlooked for how much value good defense provides you, because think about the confidence it gives your pitching staff when they know, man, I got the best defense behind me. They're going to make all the plays and all the hard plays. Pitchers just feel way more free to attack guys, whereas if your defense is bad, in the back of your head, subliminally as a pitcher, you're thinking, God, like I hope I strike this guy out because I don't want him to hit one, and all of a sudden he botch a throw. Brian Walters was throwing 96, 98 on Scout Day. His brother Andrew, yep, I remember Andrew Walters. Made it to the majors this year with Cleveland. Alex Guerrero, who at age 24 is the team's oldest player, could be the midweek starter. He went 7-3 for Hawaii last season. Okay. Bullpen, it's like, all right, who cares about the bullpen? So to me, Canes, reading through that, and we'll go to Georgia Tech now. Miami, I mean, they're going to have to really outperform what people think from reading that. Because a lot of it was, we don't know how much he's going to hit, or, you're looking for a little bit more power. You got one of the best hitters in college baseball in the middle of your lineup, right, in Cuvée. But you need guys around him. So, that's going to be how deep is that Miami lineup going to be? And pitching, starting rotation-wise, you don't seem to have a lot of star power. Hugas is going to be a great player for us. He was the setup guy in the Cape, and he ended up winning his team the championship with a big performance in the title game. No way. I only care about the bullpen. The bullpen is why we were so bad. Well, that's because the bullpen's usually like you're not as good pitchers. So it just goes. This right here talks about how Georgia Tech, and I'm part of this, is like you almost always make the NCAA tournament, and for a long period of time we were just hosting regionals every year, and we couldn't get out of them. Right? We couldn't win our own regional. Georgia Tech has found itself stuck when it comes to the postseason results for nearly 20 years. The last time it won a regional was 2006, which is also the last time the program went to the College World Series. Since then, despite all of the postseason appearances, the Yellow Jackets have been eliminated in a home regional 4 times, including 3 straight from 2009 to 2011. I was there in 2011. What killed us is our Friday guy got hurt the day before the regional, and he tried to go out and pitch, and he just couldn't do it. And we had to go to the bullpen in our first inning in the opening game of the regional. So it just destroyed our pitching for the rest of the regional. And then we ended up losing. No way, man. We had 3 pitchers drafted in the first 5 rounds. We had to stretch them to the 8th, 9th inning to win games. Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough when you have like one part of your staff is really good, whether it's your bullpen or your rotation, but like you can't ever seem to, like as soon as you give it to the bullpen, game gets given up, or as soon as you the starting pitcher makes it so hard for, even if the bullpen throws a bunch of zeros, you can't make it back. The program continues to produce professional talent, especially when it comes to position players. It's had 5 players taken in the first 15 picks of the draft, most recently Kevin Parada, 11th overall. And sophomore outfielder Drew Burris, the reigning National Freshman of the Year, has a chance to add to that total when he's eligible in 2026. Which every Georgia Tech's coach on staff was like, "Thank we get this guy for 3 years, baby." Yellow Jackets were really good defensively last year, setting a program record. It's no guarantee that level of defense will carry over from year to year, but when run prevention has been the biggest issue in this era of Georgia Tech baseball, it has to be taken as a positive sign. So the biggest issue, guys, for Georgia Tech for the last 5 years, and I was coaching there for basically 3 seasons from 2019 to 2021, and the biggest issue was we just could not pitch at league average. We gave up so many runs. In 2 of those years, we had arguably the best offense in the country, but we would just lose games 11-9 or 12-10. And so, Canes, I feel your pain, man, because when I was coaching there, you couldn't hold on to a 5-run lead in the 8th. You couldn't hold on to it. And that takes a team from being one of the best teams in the ACC and hosting a regional to, you're a 2 seed at Tennessee or you're a 2 seed at Vanderbilt. Like, Georgia Tech also kind of gets hosed in the NCAA tournament because if you're not hosting, and Miami's kind of like this too, but for Georgia Tech, if you're not hosting, you go to Vandy, you go to Tennessee, you go to University of Florida. So for some reason, Georgia Tech always seems to get sent to like the number 1 overall seeds regional or the number 2 overall seeds regional every time if they're not a host. So we'll get into the team here. Freshman class brings excitement to the mound. It's no secret that pitching has been Georgia Tech's undoing more often than not of late. With things reaching nadir in 2023 when the team ERA was 6.99. Right, so 2023, like you had an offense that was probably averaging 7 or 8 runs a game, but again, when the differential is that small, it's tough. That led to a change in pitching coach with Matt Taylor taking the reins after a stint as the minor league pitching coordinator for the Atlanta Braves. Last season was marginally better with the team ERA dropping to 6.48. So I know Matt really well, known him really since kind of played against him in high school, played against him in pro ball. I think obviously your first year as a pitching coach, you're coming in and you're working with a lot of guys that you may not have recruited and stuff like that. So I think with any coach, hitting it's a little bit easier to have a major impact in the first year. That's not to say a pitching coach can't have a major impact in the first year, but you're also dealing with the talent and the guys you have there. And so I think, again, what's going to be the proof for Matt is just how he continues to improve these numbers, right? And if every year you're seeing an improvement, I think Georgia Tech's going to be in a good spot. Like, that was one thing with James Ramsey that you saw year by year, is that every guy that was returning would have a better year the next year, would make strides in some area of his offensive game. And that's the calling card of every good coach, is that every year your returners look better. Major reason for optimism is that the number will be lower once again in 2025 is a very talented freshman class. So some of the veterans returning, Tate McKee, this kid's got so much potential. Numbers weren't great last year. He was like a go-to bullpen guy, and then he got thrust into the starting rotation, and you could tell it just kind of messed with him having to change roles. But he's got big time strikeout potential, 61 strikeouts in 47 innings, really good fastball that can get up to like mid 90s. This fall against Kennesaw State, he was 92, 94. Slider was 82, 84, changeup 87, 88, fastballs up to 97. Throws pretty good strikes too. A lot of upside, Coach Hall says, absolute pro prospect. The pitch he added this fall, which I think is really going to help him, is a really, really good changeup. This is a kid that I think is kind of the sleeper on the staff, is Carson Ballard. He's kind of a guy that nothing stuff-wise jumps off the table at you, but really good command, throws strikes, and it looks like his stuff has ticked up a bit this fall. Last year, he was kind of your high 80s righty that threw a lot of strikes. And if he's sitting 90, 93 this spring, he's going to bring a lot of value this spring for them, because he's an innings eater. He throws a bunch of strikes, like I said, and a 4.41 ERA is, in this era of college baseball, is good. So if you see these numbers improve, he's going to be a weapon. Fifth-year senior Mason Patel. He'll show a 3-pitch mix made up of fastball that's 88, 90, low 80. Really good changeup. This guy's he's a really good changeup. He's kind of he's going to be your average. He's a solid pitcher that you know what you're going to get with him, but not really any star potential. This is the guy, Canes, for Georgia Tech that could take them if this guy figures it out. So Porter Bursama, he transferred from Georgia Southern, has the best raw stuff on the staff. He very well has top tier stuff in the country. Okay, I saw him pitch last year for Georgia Southern against Georgia Tech. He never got stretched out, but there were some good signs, including 14 strikeouts in 12 and 2/3 innings. He started at Georgia Tech in the midweek. He was sitting mid-90s, hammer breaking ball that nobody. I mean, he made everybody in Georgia Tech's lineup look silly. I mean, truly dominated it. I know there were some serious command issues with him at Georgia Southern that kind of prevented him from throwing a lot. But that start against Georgia Tech, there weren't any command issues, and he looked lights out. If Matt Taylor can get him to just throw strikes at a decent amount, he's going to be a complete weapon for Georgia Tech. And again, probably just ends up in the bullpen. But if for somehow he turns out to be a starter and he's really figured out his command, he could be one of the best pitchers in the country. So this is kind of your dark horse. If this guy figures it out, Georgia Tech is going to be really good. So the strike throwing was an issue, like I said. In his outing against Kennesaw, he showed a fastball 93, 95. He's been up to 98 this fall, but he sprayed it around, so it wasn't as effective a pitch as it could be. If he can get it in the zone consistently, it has a chance to be a devastating pitch. Given its low release height and natural arm side run, he'll also show a high 80s cutter and a high spin breaking ball in the low 80s. He's a really uncomfortable at bat for opposing hitters. Yeah, I mean, he made hitters look stupid, like I said. But the question is he going to be able to throw enough strikes? Freshman that will stand out, who may elbow their way into the rotation, look toward Connor Chickoli, a 6'3", 180-pound right-hander from Raleigh, North Carolina. He's consistently thrown all 3 of his pitches for strikes this fall, including a fastball from 99-2. And that's what you want. You want your starter, just throw strikes with 3 pitches, and the better the velocity, the better. But if he's sitting 99-2 and throwing 3 pitches for strikes, he's going to be good. The most highly regarded freshman in the group is Cole Royer, 6'5", 185-pound right-hander who garnered significant draft interest over the summer coming out of high school. His fastball reaches the low 90s, but the real showstopper for him is a breaking ball that spins in excess of 3,000 RPM. His spin rate was 3,200 at the draft combine, which is the 3rd highest at the event. Stuff is clearly there for him to have a role right away, but improved consistency is important. BA, how do you know if a pitcher profiles as a starter versus a reliever? Well, I mean, typically for your starters, like for example, a bullpen guy, you really just need 2 pitches, right? You need a good fastball and a good breaking pitch, because as a bullpen guy, you're not in there for 5 innings. You're typically not going to go more than 1 time through the order against hitters, so you don't need a lot of different pitches. You just need 2 good pitches. And so typically your bullpen guys are 2-pitch guys. Again, there's going to be more emphasis on throwing strikes with a starter because he's in the game for a longer period of time. So if you're walking 2 guys an inning as a starter, that's not going to play. Starters, you need really, it's an ACC and the SEC, you need 3 pitches that are, again, they don't have to be wipeout stuff, but you need 3. And again, I hate when people say, well, he's got big league average stuff. It's like most pitchers in college baseball do not have big league average stuff, or else they would be dominating if it's a big league average pitch. So in college, you really just, if you have a couple below average major league pitches that you can throw for strikes and you have a pretty solid fastball, you profile as a starter because you can command and stay in the zone. You have multiple pitches that you can kind of keep people off balance with. When you face a bullpen guy, you know what you're getting. It's either the fastball or the slider, right? Typically. So it's really about the pitch repertoire, the command. It's not as much about how tall you are or anything like that. It's more about kind of your pitch package and how good your command is. So this, I mean, the stuff is clearly there for him to have a role right away, but improved consistency is important. So it sounds like he really, he was kind of inconsistent with his command, probably going to start out in the bullpen. But again, a guy who with that kind of breaking ball who could be a weapon if he throws strikes. Ryan Johnson, 6'4", 168. Got to get some meat on this kid's bones if he's throwing 90-93 with a sinker. Get him up to 200. Holy cow, he'll be throwing 98. 3-pitch mix, so that's what you're looking for. Thorpe Muskie, who I've seen this kid throw, he's really good, who has been dealing with a minor finger injury this fall, but he's trending in the right direction as the spring approaches, and his fastball has been up to 94, 95. This is one of the more highly thought of guys that have come in. Kind of a stockier, thick build, kind of bulldog, like almost Carson Fulmer type looking guy. And really good fastball. And yeah, I mean, finger issue is tough. Probably a blister injury on his throwing hand. Then there are 4 freshmen who are potential two-way players at some point in their Georgia Tech careers. Joshua Evans is a left-hander from Gwinnett County who has been up to 95. Danny Hall calls right-hander Cooper McMullen the sleeper of the group. He's been up to 93 this fall, and he struck out the side in his exhibition. So what I'm noticing right away, and again, like Canes, you and I know some of these velo numbers are not going to be this high in the spring. It's just how it always is. But they're going to have significantly, what it seems like, more velocity on the team than in the last couple of years, which is good. But again, if you're not throwing strikes, who cares? Connor Schaus and Alex Hernandez are right-handers who will also be in the mix for playing time in the outfield or at the corner infield spots. Hernandez is out this fall from a pitching standpoint, but that won't stand in the way of him being ready to go for the spring. And with his impressive opposite field power from the right side, look for him to find his way at some point or into some at-bats. And with Schaus' fastball already up to 94, early innings could be an offering for him as well. Connor Schaus, I've seen him as well. Like, his fastball is legit. I've seen him up around 94, 95. Good slider. Command's deep, pretty good. So, again, another guy. Like, Georgia Tech's going to have some young guys that got velocity. And what Danny Hall says here is, in one of our scrimmages, we threw like 5 or 6 freshmen in a row, and they only gave up 1 run. They only walked 2 guys, which is a good sign, right? You're not putting them runners on base. You're getting guys out. Speaking of two-way players, Riley Stansford is one who will have a role on the mound after putting up a 5.94. This guy's got legit fastball, big-time velocity. His issue is command. He's the type of kid that can be a lockdown back-end bullpen guy if he keeps his walk rate low. Because in college baseball now, you walk a couple guys, it's so easy to hit balls out of the park that you get a guy will clip one and you just gave up 3 runs. That was his issue last year. Caden Campbell, who transferred from Louisville, looking to regain his form from Louisville. So again, that's always kind of like, you're always kind of hoping for the best, but typically they don't really turn out to be kind of big time contributors. Georgia State transfer Brady Jones has stuff tailor-made for the back end of the bullpen, up to 95. Caden Spivey from Notre Dame will look to recapture his 2023 form after a tough 24 season. Swigert transferred from the Citadel, who combined for a 5.5, 5.1 ERA. Had a good summer in the MLB Draft League, up to 91. This kid, 5th-year senior from Georgia Southern, I've seen him pitch. He's kind of done everything. He's been a starter. He's been a bullpen guy. Really good fastball. He's coming off Tommy John. So the question, in the 1 inning he threw, all his fastballs were 92, 94. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they pitch him in the spring. Georgia Tech was in the process of rebuilding its lineup after it's lost the likes of Christian Campbell, Angelo Despina, Jake DeLeo, Stephen Reed, Jackson Finley, and Drew Compton. They're in a similar place this fall after the departures of Matthew Ellis, Peyton Green, Trey Younger, Cam Jones, Mike Bichetti, and Bobby Zamarzlak, all of whom played a part in getting the team back to a regional after missing out in 2023. Danny Hall says, I would say I'm optimistic. Do I think we're there yet? No, but I do feel good about our depth and that by mid-February we should be in a good position to hopefully be a good offensive team. And that's one thing with James Ramsey at the helm offensively. You feel like there's been a few years where you're rebuilding a lineup and you think it's going to be a down year, and then all of a sudden a lot of guys surprise you and they're still really putting up a lot of runs. Obviously, similar to Miami's lineup, Canes, like you have Drew Burress in the middle of the lineup who hit 381 with over 500 on base percentage and 820 slugging percentage. Burress was the most impressive hitter I saw all spring last year. His in-game adjustments, a guy would get him out front on changeups early in an at-bat in his first at-bat. The next at-bat, he's sitting a changeup and he'd hit a homer. And I could just tell that from the in-game replay when I was in the booth doing the broadcast. I'm like, yeah, he was sitting changeup. You could tell by his timing. So he's really not just got a great swing and he's a great hitter. I mean, he really is making in-game adjustments that a lot of freshmen takes him a year to learn that, right? And he learned that right away. And that was my big question mark for him at the beginning of the season, is when guys start to pitch him, because he was leading off to start the year. And I said, they're going to pitch him like a leadoff hitter for a while. As soon as he takes off, he's going to have to adjust to being pitched like a middle of the order hitter and getting a lot off speed and everything. And it could not have been more impressive. He plays a very good center fielder thanks to his above average speed and range. I think this is a little overstated. I talked to a lot of scouts about his speed. He's kind of an average at best runner, home to first. He gets pretty good jumps in the outfield. I think his routes are decent. He's by no means an elite defender in the outfield, but he's serviceable in center field. I do think again, as he ages and everything like that, he could turn out to be, especially in pro ball, could end up being a corner outfielder. But I think he's a solid center fielder in college baseball. But I think it's with guys that have this much star power, it's very tempting to kind of overplay how good they are defensively. And his times home to first were very, because I had always heard he's a very good runner. And in the booth watching the games doing broadcasts, I'm thinking, man, like, I'm surprised he didn't beat that out. And then I talked to a lot of the scouts I know, and they were telling me, like, he's running from the right side. He's running like 4.3, 4.4 to first base, or 4.2, 4.3 to first base. So he's not like he's not slow, but he's not an above average runner in that sense. So another superstar freshman, another one of our former clients, Drew Rogers, catcher, has the potential to be the next in line among Georgia Tech standout catchers. Really good bat. I mean, I think a guy who's going to hit right away, has made a lot of strides defensively, but I mean, he's built like a train. 6'1", 220. Doesn't look like a freshman. Plus raw power from the right side. He's no slouch defensively. He's turned in pop time second base as quick as 1.83. And so, again, that was the one thing when he was going through the process, is everyone loved his bat. There was question marks if, his bat was so good, he doesn't need to catch. He could play left field or right or third base or whatever. But his defense has really taken a huge step forward. Who makes that? The other thing is you got Von Lackey there, who started 36 games last season, or started 26 games last season. The thing with Von Lackey, defensively, really good. Elite defensively. Problem is, offensively, he hit about 190. And you really just didn't look confident at the plate. Didn't look like he had an idea of what he was trying to do a lot of times. Took a lot of pitches that you thought, why isn't he swinging the bat there? He's the most versatile player we have on the team. I think he can play every position on the field except pitcher. He runs a 6'6", 60. He's just athletic as all get out. And again, I think if Drew Rogers is, somewhat close to him defensively, Drew Rogers is going to be the starter. Because if you look at Drew Rogers as a guy who could be, a 315, 320 hitter with 10 plus home runs, he's going to be in the lineup every day. So we'll have to see with that. Top returning hitter by many measures is fifth-year senior infielder John Giesler. This is a guy I've told you guys about, who he's been there, he's fifth year, right? So when I coached him his freshman year, I thought, he just didn't do anything spectacularly. Great kid, great hardest worker on the team, but he's one of those guys you just kind of felt like he's probably never going to play. Just doesn't have the star power as a corner infielder or whatever to make it. And he just put his head down and grinded every day, worked his tail off, and now he's, for the last 2 years, he came off an injury this year, which kind of affected his numbers some, but the year prior, he hit like 340 with 10 plus home runs. He's coming off of batting 282, 379, 596. So great on-base percentage, great slugging with 17 doubles, 10 home runs, 53 RBIs, while splitting his time just about evenly between first base and third base. And he did miss about 3 weeks with an injury. The third seems more likely given the arrival of sophomore Georgia Southern transfer Kent Schmidt. Really good hitter. And again, see, Kane's like the difference between Miami and what I'm seeing with Georgia Tech is like you're seeing a lot of guys from Georgia Tech that are transfers that it's like, he hit 320 wherever he was or whatever. So guys that are just more likely to produce similar numbers, whereas you're not hoping for a boost. This is the one guy in Georgia Tech's top 150 college rankings, right? Another transfer, junior Kyle Lodice, cousin of Florida State infielder Alex Lodice, slated to take over at shortstop. He has as much star power as any Georgia Tech position player other than Burris. Shows athleticism, quickness, range, along with a plus arm strength. He's also a good runner, as shown by his 9 stolen bases over the summer in the Cape. His offense shouldn't be overlooked, though. He batted .370, .498, .693 with 14 home runs and 43 walks compared to 27 strikeouts last season at Division II Augusta. So what have I been telling you guys? You go to Division II and you put up numbers, people will want you. This guy balled out at Division II Augusta, and now he's a top 150 college prospect for the draft, and he's the starting shortstop at Georgia Tech. Scouts came away impressed with his plate discipline and sneaky pop on the Cape. The likeliest player to be his double play partner is Carson Kearse, who started 37 games last season, 25 of them at third base, 7 at second, 3 at shortstop, batted .282 at .392 on base percentage. He's a very good defender. So this is probably a likely. I think Carson. He got a lot of experience last year. Kind of fell off late in the season. He was hitting around .310 pretty much the whole year, and then kind of fell off late. Again, he only started in 35 games, so he was kind of like filling in for injuries when Giesler got hurt, and then he was so good defensively, he bounced around some. But I mean, look, with consistent at bats, those numbers all improve, and he's got that experience already, right? And he has a great on base percentage, great eye at the plate. Probably a guy that'll be lower in the order. Freshman Will Baker, an Australian who can really hit. He has an excellent hit tool from the left side and has some power despite not being the biggest guy at 6 foot, 188 pounds. If he proves that he can hit ACC pitching right out the gate, the coaching staff could look to get his bat in the lineup by plugging him in at first base. First, third base, or in the outfield. Freshman Caleb Daniel, who Hall sees one of the team's most complete young players. A catcher in high school, Daniel can play anywhere on the field, and he has some left-handed pop. The leaders for playing time around Burris in the outfield are junior Parker Brocious and sophomore Tyler Nesis. Brocious quietly had a very good year at the plate. Really good year. Again, he got some inconsistent playing time. Even though he's performing well, I think because he doesn't hit for a lot of power, he was kind of like the debate in the coaching room was, do we go with him? He's more consistent hitter, but this guy is, he could hit a 3-run bomb for us, even though he's not hitting as well. More walks and strikeouts, stolen bases. He's a top of the order / he could very well be the leadoff guy this year. Nesis had just 7 at-bats last season, but he's been one of the most improved players for Georgia Tech since the end of the 24 campaign. He was an all-star in Northwoods League, in which he batted .321, .419, .397. Has continued to impress at the plate back on campus this fall. He's got plenty of raw power in his 6'3", 220-pound frame, though he's still a work in progress defensively. Fifth-year senior Cornell transfer. Launched a home run to left. But again, so I think Miami and Georgia Tech, to me, Kane's looking at it. I think Georgia Tech, Miami's got more like college transfers that are have a lot of experience. I think Georgia Tech's going to have a decent number of freshmen. I think Georgia Tech may have the edge in the season, at least just looking at the numbers on paper right now. But again, if the game was played on paper, it wouldn't matter. The game is played between the lines, and so it's going to be interesting to see kind of how both these two teams get out of the gate, how they look, and what adjustments they make, and who ends up making the starting lineup and consistent innings in the pitching staff. So I think it's fun to kind of see where we could be going as far as where we could be going with the spring this year and the outlooks and stuff. And we'll do some more of this obviously over the next 4 or 5 weeks, because we got a lot of time left before the spring starts, and we'll look at the ACC and the SEC, and then obviously some mid-majors and everything. But I'm going to end it here, guys. So thanks for tuning in and chatting and everything like that. Again, if you're looking for help in the recruiting process, scan that QR code. We'll meet with you to talk about